Good afternoon and welcome to SEEA's Policy Highlights webinar. This is Cyrus Bhedwar, Policy Director for the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to hop on the webinar and we'll get started shortly. Good afternoon and welcome to SEEA's first ever Members Only Policy Highlights webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Cyrus Bhedwar and I serve as SEEA's Policy Director. I'm also joined today by my colleague Kate Lee, SEEA's Policy Manager, whom you'll hear from in a few minutes. As SEEA members, we hope you're familiar with our organization and the work we do, but as a reminder, SEEA is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization advancing energy efficiency in 11 states in the Southeast. We focus on three key areas, including policy, which we'll be talking about more today, as well as the built environment, which addresses new and existing buildings. And our third area is energy efficiency financing, which works primarily with electric cooperatives throughout the region to develop on-bill and on-tariff financing solutions for energy efficiency. Before we get into the heart of the webinar, I wanted to share a few other opportunities to engage with SEEA throughout 2017. First, next month, in association with its July board meeting, SEEA will be hosting a networking lunch on July 11th, addressing the emerging connections between energy efficiency and public health. This will be hosted by the Tennessee Valley Authority in Nashville, and more information is available on our website. Secondly, SEEA and AESP Southeast will be co-hosting our annual conference on October 17th and 18th in Atlanta this year. The agenda will address a variety of existing and evolving issues in the energy and utility sectors and feature sessions including beneficial electrification, energy data access, and a utilities-only forum. We hope you can join us. Additionally, SEEA is about to launch its first ever energy efficiency policy survey. This online survey is designed to identify the issues that regional stakeholders are most interested in addressing, as well as key questions they'd like to see answers to. As SEEA members, you'll have the opportunity to participate in the survey later this summer. Then, at our conference in October, we'll be presenting the results. A few logistical items before we get started. We will be recording and archiving this webinar on the SEEA website should you wish to share it with colleagues who are not able to attend. We have the phone lines muted during the presentation. In the meantime, you can use the Q&A feature in your control panel, usually found on the right-hand side of your screen, to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we'll answer them following our remarks. Finally, as the first webinar of this type, we'd value your feedback and perspective on what we can improve. We intend to repeat this process on a periodic basis, and we want this to be as valuable for our members as possible. We'll list our email addresses at the end of the presentation where you can contact us with any additional feedback. So on with the webinar. For several years, SEEA has produced quarterly policy highlights, which are archived on the Resource Center on our website. Today, you should have received the most current version of the policy highlights as an exclusive members-only preview. This webinar will review the material contained in that document and allow you the opportunity to ask questions about them. Today, we'll cover federal, state, and local policy developments that directly and indirectly impact energy efficiency. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Kate Lee, to get us started with a few federal developments that have occurred in 2017.
Thanks, Iris, and welcome everybody. So starting off with some federal policy context, I'll start with the 2018 proposed federal budget. So on May 23rd, the Trump administration released their official proposed budget for fiscal year 2018. And that budget proposal includes pretty deep cuts in a number of efficiency-related programs at both the Department of Energy and at EPA. A few specifics is that the budget proposes to zero out funding for the EPA-run Energy Star program. It proposes a 70% budget cut overall for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at DOE, which could have major impacts, if not potentially eliminate, its Appliance and Equipment Energy Efficiency Standards program. And the budget would also zero out funding for the Federal Weatherization Program, the State Energy Program, and would provide $20 million to ARPA-E for the purposes of closing out that agency. Since 2017, funds have already been appropriated. Those funds should remain mostly unaffected, although it is worth noting that there was a brief period in April where DOE withheld some funds from previously approved ARPA-E projects. Since that time, that money has been unfrozen, and as of now, DOE is continuing to fund projects as normal. Looking forward, Congress has not yet started the process of developing the 2018 budget, but we will continue to see that process develop through the rest of summer and into the fall. Next, I just have a kind of quick update on the Clean Power Plan, which may be a sentence you never thought you'd hear again, but in late April, the DC Circuit granted the Trump administration's request to delay the court's ruling on the legality of the Clean Power Plan. The court basically agreed to hold the case in abeyance or pause its ongoing consideration for a period of 60 days, and also allows parties to file briefs during that time addressing the future of the rule. That 60-day timeline should be coming to an end in approximately a week. In the meantime, EPA appears to be moving forward with plans to withdraw the rule, although we don't know what timeline that will occur over. And if they were to do so, that could create a setting where there might be more legal actions in the future, as the U.S. Supreme Court has found that EPA has an obligation to address greenhouse gas emissions. Relatedly, President Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would be withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord. And under that agreement's terms, that withdrawal process could begin in 2020. Interestingly, following that announcement, a variety of states and businesses announced that they would remain committed to the terms of the agreement, and over 200 city mayors, including over 40 from the Southeast, also stated their intention to continue with Paris action. Overall, Trump's election has created a kind of major shift in federal priorities and policy, and in response, we're already seeing more attention being focused at the state and local levels. One last item that's not on the slides. So news came out yesterday that the Senate is likely to reintroduce federal energy reform legislation soon. The bill would be a revival of a bill that stalled in Congress last year, with the Senate and House versions of the reform bill looking pretty radically different, with the Senate version having a lot of provisions to promote energy efficiency in various ways, and the House version proposing cuts to a number of environmental and efficiency standards. We'll have to wait and see how that process will unfold this time around, but it may be something to follow over the next few months. So with that, I will turn it back over to Cyrus to talk about some recent developments in state regulatory policies.
Thanks, Kate. And there is a lot of activity at the state level. So what we've done is broken it down into three areas, and I'll touch on regulatory policy before turning it back over to Kate for the legislative updates, and then we'll wrap that up with some executive actions that have taken place. So our next slide, as I mentioned, is packed. I'll begin with two of the significant regulatory proceedings currently underway. Both Louisiana and Mississippi have begun proceedings that will result in rules for a comprehensive implementation of energy efficiency programs by the utilities that are regulated in each state. I'll begin with Louisiana. Earlier this year, the PSC released a request for public comment on a variety of issues associated with this comprehensive phase. SEEA, along with the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, known to many as ACEEE, submitted joint comments in response to this request and later attended a technical conference on the matter in March. Then, a few months later, the Commission followed up with an additional request for comments, and responses to that were due earlier this week. Again, SEEA partnered with ACEEE to submit comments. Both of these requests dealt with a variety of issues under consideration by the Commission and sought stakeholder feedback on how these issues might be addressed. Some of the issues covered were utility participation in the comprehensive phase, large customer opt-out, cost-effectiveness testing, evaluation, measurement, and verification, as well as many other issues. At the March technical conference, the PSC staff present indicated that their likely path forward would involve writing draft rules and issuing them for public comment. While the Commission did not establish a deadline for finalizing Phase 2 rules, the utility's current Quick Start programs are expected to operate through summer of this year, and the rules are expected to be finalized sometime in 2018. During the March technical conference as well, most of the stakeholders expressed interest in aligning the energy efficiency programs with calendar years, suggesting that the comprehensive phase might start on January 1st, 2019, although that date is very subject to change. SEEA will continue to monitor this docket and further communications from the Commission on this matter. Staying with Louisiana, they also opened another docket that, while not directly addressing energy efficiency, may have impacts. The Commission opened an inquiry titled, "The Status of Electricity Rates in Louisiana. Where are we and where are we going?" That sought information to help the Commission evaluate its options in light of the utilities filed IRPs, which included expenses for additional generation over the next 10 to 15 years. The Commission has scheduled 3 technical conferences on this matter, one of which has already occurred, and 2 which remain, to gather stakeholder input. Again, SEEA will continue to monitor this proceeding. Finally, it's important to note that the Louisiana PSC has experienced some turnover at the Commission level in the last year. Late last year, Commissioner Holloway passed away. Commissioner Mike Francis was appointed in his place. And then earlier this spring, just a few weeks ago, Commissioner and then current Chair Scott Angel announced his resignation from the Commission. Governor John Bell Edwards appointed Damon Baldone in his seat until a special election can be held. In Mississippi, the Commission is similarly progressing to rules for a comprehensive phase. And like Louisiana, they released a request for comment on a similar variety of issues this year. Comments were due back at the beginning of June. SEEA understands that the Commission will likely draft rules for public comment and issue them later this year in order to finalize the rules before their deadline of September 2017. Moving on to a new subject. Beginning last year, SEEA began observing a trend of utilities filing to increase their fixed customer charges. This trend has been a response to utilities encountering flat or declining sales and needing to recover costs for past capital investments. Throughout 2016, most of this activity occurred outside of the Southeast, and overall, 85% of the utilities' requests were denied by their respective commissions. The following filings listed on the slide reflect similar proposals within SEEA's 11-state territory. SEEA is monitoring this trend to better understand any impacts on energy efficiency, as customers facing sufficiently high fixed charge may not have a financial incentive to reduce their energy use through efficiency. Essentially, if you cannot lower your bill beyond a certain point, energy efficiency investments cannot pay for themselves. Moving on to utility-run energy efficiency programs, a few updates from Virginia, which has seen an uptick in energy efficiency-related activity over the past couple years. and Kate will expand upon that in her next slide as well. Dominion recently filed to renew and expand programs within its energy efficiency portfolio. However, the State Corporation Commission denied many of these, which participating stakeholders ascribed to the Commission's deference to the Rate Impact Measure test, one of the 5 cost-effectiveness tests used to evaluate energy efficiency programs. In most states, reliance on RIM is not standard practice and can steeply limit the size of a utility's energy efficiency portfolio. And then skipping ahead one bullet in our slide, related to cost-effectiveness testing, the National Efficiency Screening Project released the first version of its National Standard Practice Manual, a guidance document that provides stakeholders with refreshed guidance on how to develop cost-effectiveness screening protocols. Among its features, it allows for regulators to more explicitly consider policy goals when determining how to calculate the cost-effectiveness of energy efficiency programs. And then moving back up, following the legislation passed last year by the Virginia General Assembly, the Virginia State Corporation Commission released draft EM&V rules for public comment. In 2016, the legislature had ordered the SEC to conduct a review of EM&V practices and issue a report with its findings, which was completed last year. The SEC followed by drafting EM&V guidance for its regulated utilities, which were released earlier this year. Comments are due by July 28th and will be followed by a public hearing on September 8th. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kate.
Great. So just a few updates on state legislation. This year, we haven't really seen any significant state legislation related to energy efficiency, with the focus instead being largely on solar. The first example of that I'll discuss is HB 589 in North Carolina. So the introduction of that bill followed months of negotiation by a stakeholder group that was convened by the state house, and which included Duke Energy, renewable and solar advocates, and other industry groups. The bill, which is currently passed the state house and is now before the Senate, sets up a competitive bidding process for new solar construction and allows third-party leasing of rooftop panels for the first time in North Carolina. That bill is largely expected to pass and has been endorsed by the governor as well. The next two, again, very briefly touch on, in Georgia, there was a law that passed that allows for solar development on farm and conservation use properties where it was previously not allowed under covenants that were attached to those properties. And in Florida, the legislature passed a bill exempting some solar from ad valorem taxation. Lastly, I will discuss just one more development that stems from a 1992 bill passed by the South Carolina legislature that tasks the state's energy office with creating a statewide energy plan. Following a long period of stakeholder engagement and input, the Energy Office released that final state energy plan in February of this year. The plan recommends setting up working groups to address various energy issues, including most relevantly to this conversation, building energy codes and energy efficiency financing. We have gotten word that at least some of these working groups are currently being formed, and we will continue to monitor any other developments or opportunities to be involved in the process moving forward.
Moving on to the executive branch at the state level, Virginia has been most active in this space. Upon taking office, Governor Terry McAuliffe established the Governor's Executive Council on Energy Efficiency and appointed what SEEA believes is the first Chief Energy Efficiency Officer in his cabinet. The Governor's Executive Council has been charged with developing a roadmap to help Virginia achieve a voluntary electricity reduction goal established in 2007, and its work is ongoing. Additionally, Governor McAuliffe issued Executive Order 57, which convened a working group of 5 state agencies to collect stakeholder input and issue a report on the actions that could be taken to reduce carbon emissions from power plants in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Earlier this year, the working group issued its final report, which included 5 key recommendations listed on our slide. Since the report, Governor McAuliffe has also issued Executive Directive 11, which asks the Departments of Environmental Quality and Natural Resources to develop a regulation that addresses carbon emissions from electric power plants and submit it to the State Air Pollution Control Board for consideration by year's end.
And lastly, a couple of updates at the local level. So on May 1st, the Atlanta City Council unanimously voted to commit the city to transition to 100% renewable energy. More specifically, that resolution says that all city-owned facilities will be 100% renewable by 2025, and that all electricity used within the city of Atlanta will be renewable by the year 2035. To be able to meet that goal, energy efficiency will need to be a major part of the city's strategy. So we'll continue to keep an ear out for what the next steps will be in that process. Also, so Atlanta is the first city in Georgia to adopt a 100% renewable commitment, and it's the largest city in the Southeast to do so, but I think it is important to note that it's not the first or the only city in our region to make that kind of commitment. A number of other cities, including Abita Springs, Louisiana, Boone, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, and Orlando and St. Petersburg have all made similar renewable commitments. And in other cities, similar resolutions are in the works. Again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, with a larger emphasis being placed on state and local governments, we're likely to continue to see more developments at the local level.
Thanks, Kate. At this point, we'll turn it over to our audience for questions. So as a reminder, you can use the chat feature in your control panel to submit a question, and we'll answer those as received. Just giving folks a few minutes to submit any questions they may have. Well, on behalf of SEEA, thank you for participating in our inaugural members-only policy. Oh, we just got a question come in. So the question is, are the EE recommendations in Virginia going to translate into budget and goal for utilities, or will EE be accomplished in another way? So the state of Virginia is quite, or the Commonwealth of Virginia is quite active on energy efficiency activities, although I don't believe at this point any of them require commitments from the utilities to increase their energy efficiency programs. And in fact, I think I might have, no, I did cover Dominion's submission of additional DSM programs, which was partially rejected by the State Corporation Commission. So in fact, we're seeing kind of the opposite trend for that issue. The EM&V proceedings may provide the State Corporation Commission with new approaches to consider the energy programs that the utilities submit, but at this point, there are no requirements or firm commitments to increase spending from the utilities. I hope that answers the question. I can, and in fact, I did yesterday. So sorry, the question is, can you comment on ACEEE's recent report ranking Southeastern utilities towards the bottom of the utilities nationally on EE? And yesterday, ACEEE hosted a webinar on its utility scorecard and kindly invited SEEA as well as a couple of the other regional energy efficiency organizations to comment on their utilities' performance respectively. and I was part of that conversation. I described the South's relative newness to energy efficiency. We've only had a decade or two worth of experience at the utility level of energy efficiency in its current form. I also described some of the policy factors. So the ACEEE scorecard, I think, effectively described that both company and policy support is needed for effective energy efficiency deployment. And those utilities that have both, such as utilities located within the Northeast in states like Massachusetts, will perform very highly on those measures. In other parts of the country, such as the Southeast, where policymakers have a variety of goals, like encouraging the siting of manufacturing for economic development purposes, that encourages policymakers, for example, to keep rates low at those customers' request. And energy efficiency, because of the way the costs are recovered, can appear to increase rates for those customers. So I think it's a matter of the policy goals, and it's a matter of the energy efficiency industry understanding those policy priorities and ensuring that policymakers feel that energy efficiency supports those sorts of priorities. But I believe ACEEE will be making the recording of that webinar available on their website, where you'll be able to download it and listen to the whole hour-long conversation. Looks like that brings us to the end of our questions. So again, on behalf of SEEA, thank you so much, first for your membership in our organization and your commitment to energy efficiency, but also for joining us for our inaugural members-only policy highlights webinar. As I mentioned at the top of the call, we plan to do this on a periodic basis, and we will certainly let you know when our next policy highlights webinar is. We do continue to deliver the policy highlights in written form on a quarterly basis. Everyone should have the most recent version as of today, and we'll issue those again probably twice before the end of the year. And if you have feedback, we've listed our emails here on this slide. You're also welcome to call us and share any feedback on this webinar, what you'd like to see in future versions of it. But on behalf of SEEA, thank you and have a great afternoon.